And we return, 7 minutes past 1 o'clock. It's today's Topical Currents. Joseph Cooper with you. Today's topic is child sexual abuse. Of course, it's detested by sane and caring people, but it still occurs all too often. Joining me now in the studio is Charles Bailey. He's now in his mid-50s, but has written about the sexual abuse he endured, which began when he was only 10 years old. He's gone through many hours of therapy and is an advocate against child sexual abuse, particularly by the clergy. Welcome to you, Charles Bailey. It's good to meet you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me on your show here.
It's my pleasure. Also with me is Trudy Novicki. She's the executive director of Christie House in Miami-Dade County, which nurtures kids and families struggling with the many issues of abuse. Welcome to you. Good to see you again, Trudy.
Good to be here again.
And April is National Child Abuse Month.
Yes, I'm so glad you're starting off the month with recognition of that. It is National Prevention of Child Abuse Month, and we're happy to be here and talk about this.
By all means,
today.
we all want to prevent
such
horrible occurrences. Charles Bailey, I read of your story in your book, which was self-published, by the way. It's called In the Shadow of the Cross, and your struggle to keep these secrets for 40 years and how it affected your life. Start at the beginning.
Well, it started as I was a 10-year-old boy. It's a grooming process, as I go over in the book. First, the priest was teaching our catechism class. He befriended me. He commented on how well my catechism assignments were, and then it was commenting and praising, putting a hand on his shoulder, and then arm around me, and then escort me to the bus, and progressed over a series of a couple of months till he worked his way into his house and befriended my family. It's not a random act of violence that these people do. It's a carefully planned out rape, basically, is what it is. And that's just what he did to me. He just gained my confidence. I was such a good little boy, so religious, did my studies, was anxious to please, of course. And he just worked his way into my life that way and then abused me in my own home. That's where it started.
So there was a psychological insight that was employed by this priest, Neary.
Yes, it was. It's as much mind control as it is physical control. He got me to believe that not only did my parents not love me, my brothers and sisters didn't love me, God didn't love me, that he's the only one that could love me and he's the only one that would love me, which I've found now that I've become an advocate that is not unique to priests that are predators. That's pretty common among all predators. They build that sense that they're the only ones that care for you truly and truly love you.
I was struck that a young boy, I guess about 11 years old, was writing suicide notes because of these events.
Yes, I did. If I wrote one, I wrote 1,000. It was mainly because of the fact I found no way out. I was up in my bedroom, like I said, and he would come several times a week over the course of almost 3 years. And I was just begging for a way out somehow. I would lay there at night and pray. I'd look at my little crucifix over the head of my bed, and I would pray that God would intervene somehow. God would come and take this man. He would make him have a stroke, a heart attack, a car accident, anything. Just take him up, save me, get him out of my life. And my prayers went unanswered. And so then I moved on to thinking, well, maybe God should take me somehow. And I would pray that he would take me. Here's a 10-year-old boy praying to die. Sorry. And so I decided I maybe should end my own life somehow. I would invent these ways of how I could do it. And then I thought, well, if I did commit suicide, then I was going to hell anyway, because of being a Catholic.
Now, your family were ardent Roman Catholics, and the priest came to your home under the guise of counseling you to become a priest. And while your family was downstairs, he was doing horrific acts to you in your bedroom. I just can't imagine how a youngster could go through such a thing and survive. But survive you did, but at great cost.
Yes, I did. I lost my childhood in an instant. On that fall day when I was 10 years old, your childhood disappears instantly. It just evaporates. From that day forward, everything you see, look, and do is different. It's not like anyone else's view. It's ripped from you in an instant, and it's gone forever. And I survived basically by going somewhere else in my mind. He would ravage my body, but I was able to mentally go somewhere else. And when he wasn't there, I would literally, I hid in the back of my closet. We had a big Cape Cod-style home with deep closets, and I just pulled my toys and my desk and all my favorite toys, and I sat back there in the back of the closet, and I was a radio announcer, or I was a astronaut, or I was anything I wanted to be. I was back there in the dark, and that's where I spent many, many, many hours.
Next, what I want you to talk about is rather graphic, and perhaps some of the faint of heart in our audience might want to tune away, but I was so struck reading your book about that this man made you carry around in your pockets Kleenex and toilet paper because of what he was doing to you.
Yes, he was extremely a control person. Sometimes the abuse would occur. He'd take me to his brother's house or his mother's home. He'd pick me up in the car. Sometimes I'd be alone. Sometimes there'd be 2 or 3 other boys with us. And when we went to another place like that, we had to make sure that we had toilet paper in one pocket and Kleenex in the other for his use and for our own use to clean ourselves up after he abused us.
From blood and semen.
From blood and semen and whatever else he could dream up to clean ourselves up, because we couldn't use the ones at his brother's house or his mother's house. Their bathroom, we could go in the bathroom, but don't use their toilet paper, don't use their tissues. It's not yours. And I remember at one time, one of the little boys sitting on the sofa next to me was so upset. And I leaned over, and I hadn't taken my turn yet. He would take us one by one in the back room and abuse us. And then, in the meantime, his sister-in-law would sit there with a plate of cookies and a little glass of milk. She had to. I mean, come on, really. She had to know. But she would feed us that, and it hadn't been my turn yet, so I noticed he was so upset, and I leaned over. He told me, he says, I forgot to put him in my pocket. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get beat harder, because he would beat us too. I mean, I didn't put that in my book, but he'd beat us too, to make us better Catholics. And so I gave him as much as I thought I could spare, so that when it was his turn, he'd have something to use. And
how was it possible that your parents didn't know?
Well, my mother, she is about as devout a Catholic as you could imagine, and she was too busy being on the phone telling all her friends and neighbors, Father Nery's here, Father Nery's here. He's teaching my son Charles to be a priest. And he forewarned her. He told her in the kitchen before he took me upstairs in the opposite end of the house. He gave specific instructions. Don't come upstairs. Do not let any of your other children come upstairs, any of my brothers or sisters. They're all to stay away. And yes, they'd be here crying. Yes, they'd hear sounds and noises.
Of course, this was 1961.
1961. Right, 1961. And that she would hear those sounds coming from the room possibly, and afterwards I could be weeping and very upset and to ignore me, because it was all part of being a priest, becoming a priest, being taught, counseled to be a priest.
We're speaking with Charles Bailey, an advocate against child abuse. He's also written a book, and we're also visiting with Trudy Nowicki of Christie House. We're going to take a short break and be back with more.
This is 91.3 WLRN's Topical Currents. Stay with us.
From Public Radio International, I'm Ray Suarez. Join Deborah Amos and me for America Abroad, Sunday nights at 7 in April. America Abroad is your passport to the world's news. We take you around the globe to explore the critical international issues of the day. We put you in touch with policymakers and people on the street to hear from those who make news and those who live it. That's America Abroad this Sunday at 7 on 91.3 WLRN.
The Miami Beach Dance Festival kicks off April 3rd with a fabulous fandango at Miami Beach Botanical Garden. Performances include the Ballet Hispanico from New York on April 4th, Mexico's Ballet Contemporáneo de Oaxaca on April 5th, and Momentum Dance Company on April 6th. Tickets and information online at MomentumDanceCompany.com or 305-858-7002.
And we return 18 minutes past 1 o'clock. It's today's Topical Currents. Joseph Cooper with you. And we're talking about the very sobering aspect of child sexual abuse with Charles Bailey. He's written a book about it. It's called In the Shadow of the Cross. We're also visiting with Trudy Novicki. She's the executive director of Christie House in Miami-Dade County, which nurtures kids and families struggling with the many issues of abuse. Tell me the story in a nutshell of Christie House, Trudy.
Well, Christie was, I assume you're asking about how we got the name Christie.
Well, we'll start there.
Okay. Christie was a little girl right after Hurricane Andrew, for those of you who remember
92.
Hurricane Andrew. The police were patrolling down in the inner city, and there was a child playing on the streets in Overtown, a little girl, and their attention was called to her, the patrol officers in their car, because there was something unusual about her. She was about 8 months pregnant.
And how old?
She was 9 years old at that time. And while she was certainly not unique in a child being pregnant, what was unique about it was that no one had done anything. Maybe it wasn't. We would like to think that was unique. But here was a child who was obviously pregnant and was just living and playing in the city with no one calling anyone's attention to it to help her. She had no help. So, of course, her case became prosecuted, and she became a victim in the system. At that time, there was really no resources for her, no one specializing in being able to deal with the child like that, being able to treat her, being able to give her the type of therapy she needed to recover. So her story was not a particularly successful one. As far as I know, she's kind of got lost in the system and went on to have several other children that became foster care children in the system. That she became a namesake for us because when Christie House was formed in the mid-'90s, a lot of people in Miami had realized that these children were falling through the cracks in the system. The typical case of child sexual abuse is the child's word against the perpetrator. The child, because the perpetrator is gentle and does groom the child, often doesn't have any physical results, and so the case can't be prosecuted, and the child often goes home, right back into the home of the abuser, because 75% of our children that are abused by a family member, and 90% of them know the abuser.
Charles, in your book, you had a startling figure that of those who relate the abuse. For each one, there's probably 60 who remain silent.
That's what Father Tom Doyle has found with his research, and he's recently revised that figure to that every one of us that comes forward, he thinks it's closer to 90 that do not come forward. And he's based that on about a 35-year career of working with those that have been abused. It's a staggering statistic, and it's currently about 1 out of every 5 females and 1 out of every 9 males that are abused. That's any sexual abuse. That's not just clergy abuse.
Trudy Novicki, there's no typical story about this, but tell us some of the services that you provide and some of what your organization, Christie House, faces.
Well, what we try to do, because it is such a silent crime, and so often the children don't disclose until they find someone they trust at whatever point that is in their life, we try to gather them up from wherever we may get the referrals. So that's the Department of Children and Families, the police, the state attorney's office, the hospitals, the rape treatment center, the child protection team. And once we get them, then they're assigned a social worker to work with them. And therapy if they need it. Of course, it's they need it. There's no child that really doesn't. We do a particular type of therapy with these children that's shown to be the most effective for child victims of sexual abuse. But we're only one agency, and we have about 700 children in Miami-Dade County that come through our doors. So if you listen to Charles and you're talking about the children that don't disclose or disclose later and those statistics, and you think about these children, it just gives you an idea of the magnitude. Whenever I go out and speak, and I'm sure there are people listening on the radio now, is that I always say there's someone in the audience, if you look to your left and to your right, there's going to be at least a half a dozen people in this room that have had some sort of sexual abuse in
Charles,
their life.
You endured this terrible abuse for more than 2 years and then lived with it for more than 40, and it ate at you. What made it come forth finally?
Well, as you say, I kept it to myself. I don't have a recovered memory or any of that. I remember from the day it happened. It was always there. And I felt that if anybody knew, they would see what he saw in me and see that I was this filthy, dirty, ugly person.
He would
that
be
was
abusing
worthless.
you and having the two of you recite the Lord's Prayer.
Yes, he would.
God.
He would. He would get to "Thy will be done" part, and he would repeat it as he was anally raping me. He would repeat that over and over again, that this is God's will, Thy will be done. And like I say, as far as disclosing it, it took 40 years for me to come forward to tell my wife, Sue. We've been married 30 years at the time. But there is no good time to say it. I say it happened when I was 10 years old, and then I became a teenager. I didn't know at 10 it was sex. I had no idea. I knew it was awful. I knew I hated it. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't understand why I had to do that to become a priest. But then I became a teenager, and I found out it was sex that I had, and it was man-boy sex. And I thought that just wasn't right. And so I'm not going to let any of my peers know that I participated in that. So you stuff it away. And then I met Sue, and we got married. She was 19, I was 21. And you don't want to tell your young bride. Who wants
You'd
to tell
been
your
married
young bride?
before, though. Also.
Yes, I did.
Both of you had.
Yes, I did. Yes, I was married to my high school sweetheart. But it didn't last very long. But her, as my wife Sue will tell you, that being married to her probably saved me, because it was a relationship that I enjoyed. It was a relationship that to me was quote unquote normal. It was a man, adult woman.
What struck me about your story, Charles Bailey, is the absolute terror and fear that you had of telling not only your wife, but your mother and your adult children. You thought that they would turn their backs on you.
Yes, I did. I would stand in front of the mirror and I would practice telling Sue, thinking that maybe if I could tell her, it would be okay. But I was so repulsed by what I saw in the mirror. I am to this day. I tell Sue, can confirm that I don't like what I see when I stand in front of a mirror. The image I have of myself is getting better. I'm getting better. I'm feeling better. But it's true. I thought they'd be repulsed by me. I thought Sue would shun me and run away. I thought my kids would be disgusted. I thought they'd keep the grandchildren from me. I thought they'd say, you can't be, can't sit on Grandpa's lap.
That they feared you would be an abuser.
I feared that that's what they would see. I really underestimated them. No, my kids and my wife. It's phenomenal. I mean, when Sue found out, we were up at our camping trailer in Lake Ontario Memorial Weekend of 2002, and once again it was on television. And after you've been married as many years as we have, you don't really have assigned seats, but you do sit in the same place. And I sat in her seat that night with the TV behind me as she's making dinner, and once again it's on TV. And Sue noticed me looking down and away when they mentioned it, and if she had said anything else, I probably could have got through it one more time and kept it hidden one more time, but she looked over at me and says, "What's the matter with you? It's not like you were abused." And the look of horror I saw on her face, I've never seen anything like that in my life. I mean, I didn't know somebody's eyes could open that big or jaw drop that far. And I swear my heart stood still for a second. I was thinking, oh my God, she's going to say, "Get out of here, you're terrible." But she just dropped everything, sat with me, and she just held me, and we both wept for hours, and I told her a short version of what had happened, and she's just the most wonderful woman in the world.
And what became of Father Neary? I was really struck also in the book when it wound up that he was in the same nursing home as your mother.
Correct. That was something that fell into place a little bit later when Sue found out that I'd been very attentive to my mom over the years. And my dad had passed, and she was in the rehab for a knee replacement, and she told me, "Oh, Father Neary's down the hall. Why don't you stop in and see him?" That was the first and last time I stopped to see my mom, which was unusual, and that was the first and last time that I went there until it was time to pick her up. Well, Sue thought that was very strange. And
you
now she
kept
knows
making
why.
excuses to avoid going to see your
Yes,
own
I
mother.
did. Yeah, I said maybe tomorrow or maybe tonight or maybe in a few days. I kept making excuses not to go there so I wouldn't run into him. Because I hadn't, like I say, at that point, Sue hadn't known. And it became clear once she found out about Neary that why I didn't want to go there.
If you had to take a guess, how many boys do you think he abused?
I know.
And he moved around.
Oh, heaven's sakes. He's
geographically,
in and around Syracuse, New York, he was in at least 18 parishes that I've tracked so far. And his victims are in the hundreds. He has hundreds of victims. He had a career that spanned 45 years of raping little boys.
And never prosecuted.
Never once prosecuted.
And he's dead now.
He's dead now, yes.
And you were very disappointed by the way the church reacted to you and the organization SNAP, which is the acronym for
Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, which I am a local leader in the Syracuse area.
The church took the stance that there was misappropriate touching going on instead of a felony rape.
That you have no idea how much that gets my dander up. They talk about inappropriate touch, inappropriate contact, or they talk about a mistake a priest made. Now, to me, a mistake is getting off the wrong exit coming to your radio station here. That's a mistake. The premeditation that takes 2 or 3 months to rape a little boy is not inappropriate. It's a crime. It's a felony crime. Anywhere else in the world, anywhere else in the nation, any other job, it's not only a crime, it's a felony crime. But in the Catholic Church, they say it's inappropriate touching, inappropriate contact, or a mistake, which is revolting.
Our telephone number, if you'd like to join in with a comment or a question, that's 1-800-743-WLRN. 1-800-743-9576. And also emails are available if you're a little bit shy. That's radio@WLRN.org. radio@WLRN.org. Tell me, Trudy Novicki, one of the quests of Christie House is also to reduce the commercial exploitation of sexual exploitation of kids. How does that work?
Well, we could have a whole other hour on that because the education on the subject itself, to call it commercial sexual exploitation and not to call it prostitution, is an education for most of the public. What we're trying to do is to educate the public on the fact that there is a real problem in this nation. Yes, there's a problem in other countries, in foreign countries, with human trafficking of children, but there is a problem in this country with it as well.
And in our community here?
In our community here. We have no knowledge of the extent of the problem because no one's even counted the children in Miami. But we know the average age of entry into prostitution in this country is 12 years old now. So most of the children that are being prostituted on our streets are females that are run by pimps. They're controlled by the pimps. They're doing it against their will. There's a terrible amount of violence going on, and it's a population that really needs to be addressed and treated as victims, not as defendants. Which they still are in many places.
Besides this prostitution of youngsters, where else does abuse occur besides the family home?
Well, the family home, just like in Charles's case, unfortunately, is the most common place for a child to be abused because that's where the child is. And if it's a trusted outsider that's coming into the home, like a priest or a babysitter, or it's actually a family member, an uncle, a father, a stepfather, then that's the most normal place where it's going to happen. There's a lot of child-on-child abuse that also goes on, and that happens in our schools, and is a real issue that teachers need to be aware of and need to be looking out for, with one child preying on another child in the school.
Charles, will you ever not be angry at what happened to you?
Never. Not going to happen. I will never not be angry. I'm at peace with it because of all the years I've been in counseling and the support of my wife. If I didn't have her support, no, I don't think I would have pulled through as well as I have. But no, I'm never not going to be.
You wrote about your trepidation of telling your sons and your son-in-law, and all of their reactions were equal. They wanted retribution. Where is that bastard?
Absolutely. What surprised me the most was my youngest son, because my older son, my namesake, Charles III, I expected him. He was a football player at the high school and college level.
And you were quite an athlete yourself.
I was in wrestling and lacrosse and so on and so forth in school. And but my youngest son is the pacifist of the family, if you will. He's most like my dad in demeanor, and the first words out of his mouth was, "Where is he?" Which is, I knew that would be Charles's first words. Where is he?
And of course, he was already dead.
He was already dead, thankfully, because my sons, I know they would have went in there and ended his life. I think Sue may have. She's been so angry at times, at least made him suffer some. But that's the way that's how it happens.
What's been the effect on Sue, your wife?
I think it's kind of brought Sue out of her shell now. She's a very powerful woman. She's a very upstanding woman. She has come out of her shell.
She's in our control room right now watching you.
Oh, okay. Hi, honey. But I would say that it's opened her eyes. She had thought, I think like I did, that maybe Thomas Neary was an anomaly. That's kind of why I allowed our children to go to parochial high school, because I kind of thought he was an anomaly, and also they were older at the time.
After what you went through, you put your kids in parochial school.
Isn't that insane? Isn't that insane? Well, I say at the time, this was before all it broke in Boston. I thought Neary was an anomaly. I didn't realize he was one of approximately 10,000 now that are out there. There's about 10,000 abusive priests out there, just in the U.S. alone.
Trudy, Vicki, how do you work with the family members who must just have horrible rage when they learn that this kind of behavior has gone on?
I think that actually those clients that have family members that are enraged, are the lucky ones, because one of the other things that Charles keeps remarking on is the support of his wife, and how he's where he is today, and he was able to go through this because he had the support of someone that he really trusted and could lean on and confide in. A lot of the response of a non-offending caretaker when the child discloses is, "It didn't happen, you're making this up, get out of here, I don't want to hear about it." And if they don't have the support of a parent, you can imagine how they deal with the shame and the guilt and the anger that they have to deal with. The parents that support them do get very, very frustrated with the system, because the system is not made to respond to these cases as criminal cases, because of proof beyond a reasonable doubt in our criminal justice system. It's very, very difficult to prove these cases in court, and the people, the caretakers, are very frustrated by that process. And what we do is try to explain the system to them and get them through the system and let them know really that their healing lies in other avenues other than that, as Charles has talked about his therapy and the years of working with that he's gone through, that's really how he's put himself back together, so to speak.
Someone listening to us right now needs help. They may suspect their child has endured abuse. Mm-hmm. How do they get in contact with Christie House?
All they have to do is call our front desk.
Or should they just call 911 first?
Well, they certainly should call 911 if it's an emergency situation. If you suspect child abuse, you should report it to the Child Abuse Hotline, which is 1-800-96-ABUSE in the state of Florida. It can be reported anonymously. If you think there is a child being abused, please call that number.
Either sexual or other physical
any
abuse.
kind of abuse. If you yourself need help or know someone that needs help with a sexual abuse issue, child sexual abuse under 18, you can call Christie House. We're at 305-547-6800, and there's a 24-hour contact on there.
And Charles Bailey, you have a website of your own about that address.
Yes, it's www.intheshadowofthecross.net. That's intheshadowofthecross.net, all one word, and there's a link on there to contact me directly, contact the author.
Tell I don't know what adjective to use, but the story of that business with the cross in your title.
The title of my book was based on, actually the original title was My Time on the Cross, which is something that the bishop had told me, because I told him, I said, I'm laying here, I'm hanging onto my bedspread for dear life, and I look up and see my crucifix over my bed, and he said, Charles, that was your time on the cross. I said, where was Jesus? Where was God helping me then? So that was the original title, but then I was told through various publishing agencies that would offend Catholics. I was comparing myself to Jesus, even though I wouldn't be. That was a common form of execution, so I modified it to In the Shadow of the Cross, because I feel like...
Why would you be hesitant to anger Catholics?
Boy, that's a good question. I guess because I want everybody to read this book. I found out through my doctor that not only does this help those that have been religiously abused, but it's spoke to anyone that's been abused. I've had folks come up to me that it's been a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, whatever, and they said, thank you, and I managed to speak the words they couldn't, and now their spouse understands. If it was the husband that was abused, the wife comes to me and says, I understand my husband now, or the other way around. The other way around also comes forward and says, I didn't realize my wife was going through this, and so not only the people that have been abused have benefited from this self-help book, so have non-victims.
Let's take a couple of phone calls on this topic. I've got Katrina in Fort Lauderdale. Hey there.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I got a little bit emotional while I was listening to the program. I just want to thank Mr. Bailey so much for his strength and his incredible courage, and for writing this book for all of us. people that had this experience and didn't. Just thank you so much. I mean, this is what world really needs. I mean, if anything could put a word forth into, for instance, the religious leaders coming up with this ridiculous excuses to stop science from progressing, so that more of the horrific crimes would be uncovered. That stuff like that could happen because of people like you, Mr. Bailey. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your call. Any comment, Trudy?
I think that there's always, I think audiences fall into two categories when they hear a story like Charles's. Either it strikes a note in their own heart, and I don't know what was in that young lady's background, but it sounded like something
I was going to
very
ask,
personal.
but I decided not to.
Or they are incredulous, like, oh, that's somebody else's story, oh, that's so far out, that's so weird, that would never happen in my family. And I think what we're really trying to do here is open people's eyes that it happens across all economic spheres, in all parts of the country, and to all types of people. And if you think it can happen to your child or to a family member of yours, you need to wake up and know what the signs and symptoms are.
What made you so interested in this problem?
Fate, I think. I actually was in the state attorney's office for 25 years as a prosecutor, and came to a point in my life where I decided I wanted to work with victims, and I wanted to work with children. I'm a mother of 5, so I just wanted to spend another career trying to help the victims in the system that the system really couldn't deal with. And I found children to be very, very caught up in the system and just can't help themselves. So I went to the child advocates in town and asked them if they found something that they thought I would be appropriate for. And they came back and said, hey, we need a director at the Child Advocacy Center. So that was 5 years ago.
I suppose you use volunteers and need support. I know you have some galas now and then. How are you funded?
Absolutely. Less and less by public funds. We all know how the economy is these days, and it seems like human services are the first thing that goes on the chopping block. We're about 50-50 between public funding and private. I should mention that there are no charges for our services. All our services are free of charge. And yes, we do survive very heavily on donations. We have an Ask event, an event coming up on April 23rd. And we also use volunteers at the center to man our playroom, to play with the children and to provide some diversion for them while their parents are in either with therapists or lawyers.
And that website again?
www.christiehouse.org.
We're going to take a short break and be back with more.
This is 91.3 WLRN and, Topical Currents. The Low Art Museum chills out to present their monthly Lowdown Happy Hour event this Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m. Special tours, refreshments, and entertainment provided. Information at 305-284-3535 and online at lowmuseum.org. The Women's International Film Festival is 100 films and 20 world premieres in 10 days. Films made by women, about women, for all who love women. You'll see films by directors from all over the globe. That's the Women's International Film Festival, March 28th to April 6th throughout South Florida. Information at 305-653-9700 or online at womensfilmfest.com. And let's look ahead to tomorrow's Topical Currents.
Hello, it's Joseph Cooper. Join me for Wednesday's Topical Currents and a discussion of state budget woes and their effect on public universities. Decreased revenues will incur a 6% hike in student tuition, eliminate some scholastic departments, and delay the opening of FIU's College of Medicine. It would be the first public med school in South Florida. So join me Wednesday at 1 o'clock.
I'm 30 years old tomorrow, and I haven't worked since I played Annie.
The Tony Award-winning musical Forbidden Broadway with the acclaimed New York cast is coming to the Arts Center in Miami. The New York Times calls Forbidden Broadway hilarious and brilliantly wicked.
Can you feel the pain tonight?
The Lion King, Wicked, Spamalot, No Show is Safe from Forbidden Broadway. Forbidden Broadway now playing at the Arts Center. Tickets at artscenter.org.
And we return 48 minutes past 1 o'clock. It's today's Topical Currents. We're visiting with suburban Syracuse resident Charles Bailey. He's the author of the book In the Shadow of the Cross that we've been talking about, which chronicles his more than 2 years of serious sexual abuse at the hand of his trusted parish priest. We're also visiting with Trudy Novicki, the executive director of Christie House in Miami-Dade County, which nurtures kids and families struggling with the many issues of abuse, or the beast. You could say that too. And if you'd like to join in, you're welcome to. That number is 1-800-743-WLRN.org, 1-800-743-9576, and email is also an option. I have an emailer here. This is from Nora. She says, "My dear husband took 60 years of his life to recognize the sexual abuse by a bishop in his Mormon church. The abuser was a friend of his father, and he never had the nerve to tell Dad about the activities that took place in the bishop's house. This sexual abuse ruined his life, made him a very shy person, unable to trust anyone. When he confronted his past, his father was dying from a brain tumor, and he could not ask him how much he knew of the abuse." What's your comment, Charles?
Well, I identify with that, and I'll tell you, that's so typical. That falls right in line with Father Tom Doyle comment about 1 in 90 coming forward. It's just, you just don't come forward with it. You just hide it because of the shame and dirt you feel. You feel like it's your fault when it isn't your fault.
Another caller, John, Fort Lauderdale. Thanks for your patience. Hi.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I'd like to play the devil's advocate here. Just forgive me if you would. I just have a couple of questions. One is, I just find it almost incredible that when you wrote your book, you didn't include the fact that you were beaten by the priest. I mean, how could you not include that? And another question I have is, did you come forward before the priest died? I mean, did he have any opportunity at all to defend himself? And I guess third is, are any of other children who were abused by this priest, are any of them alive, and have any of them come forward? That's all I have.
Okay, well, I didn't put the beating part in the book, mainly because I thought it was graphic enough and there was enough in there. I didn't feel the need to put every detail of all the abuse in there. And as far as him being dead or alive, he was dead before I came forward. But since then, there have been 35 men so far that have come forward from different parts of the nation that don't know each other. So it's pretty valid. Plus, the bishop admitted he knew that Neary was an abuser, but he thought praying would help.
And you were with a group of boys at his sister's home.
That's right. There was
and he
4
was
of us
taking
at
you
a time.
One by one.
One by one to the bedroom in the back of the house and anally raping us, and making us have oral sex on him.
Hector, Miami.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes, hi. How are you? I have to say it's kind of wow, I can't believe it. Wow, I can't believe I just got that reaction all of a sudden. Actually, I was calling because I wanted to find out if anyone on the panel knew about any private sort of resources out there for tracking people that could have abused. I myself, excuse me. Wow, I didn't expect this. Experience something like this when I was younger. Never done anything about it. Dealt with it on my own. Came to terms with it, but now that I have children of my own, I worry about this person still being out there. And I've actually on my own sometimes searched the sexual predators websites that the state has and correctional facilities have, but never seem to find him, and I've always been scared, and now even more so having children that, heaven forbid, I never did anything about this for myself because I didn't feel I needed to, but if something were to happen or continues happening to other kids as a result of it, I would love to try and contribute to putting an end to this and that particular person's ongoings.
There's several websites out there. One you could go to is familywatchdog.us. Once again, it's familywatchdog.us, and you can put in an address, and it'll give you all the registered sex offenders in your area. You can go to snapnetwork.org, our national website, and there's links on there. You could also go to bishopaccountability.org, and that has a listing of all the clergy.
Accountability.org. Thank you so much. It's a difficult subject, but it's one that definitely merits speaking about because I think the more people talk about it, the more it brings us out into the light, and some of this can stop. Hopefully all of it one day will stop.
Okay, Hector, I have to run.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Charles, I just had rather an amazing email. Someone wanted to know how do we know that your story isn't just a bunch of baloney and that you wrote a book to make money. Well, you self-published the book.
Correct. I used my own money to publish the book. I did not get a retainer or paid by some publisher to do it.
I have another emailer. This is Fritz. He says, does Charles still believe in God?
Well, that's a mouthful right there. We could do a whole show just on that one. It depends. I believe in God still, but I don't believe in the God that I was taught as a young Catholic boy. I guess that's the best way to say it. And my worship now is more directly between me and God with no middleman needed or wanted.
I only have about a minute left, but tell me a little bit about the story of Bishop Moynihan and the healing service where you felt so slighted.
Yes, it's unbearable to go into a Catholic church because of triggers, and one trigger is a Roman collar, and of course he had a healing service with 5 other priests all dressed up in their usual garb. And after I was nervous the whole service. If I could have got up and left, I would, but I couldn't. But he walked right by me when the service was over, and Sue said, She went and grabbed him and brought him back and sat him down and said, "You're going to talk to my husband."
What a powerful story. Charles Bailey is the author of In the Shadow of the Cross. And what's that website where people can get more information about your book and you?
Is intheshadowofthecross.net, and they can click on the icon for Contact the Author and contact me directly if they'd like.
Also, Trudy Novicki, the Executive Director of Christie House. If people want more information or want to help financially or as volunteers, how do they get in touch with you?
www.christiehouse.org. Our phone number is 305-547-6800.
I certainly want to thank you for coming on our program for this incredibly important topic, an emotional topic. And Charles, the best to you, and also Trudy and your kids.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And that wraps up today's edition. My apologies to those callers I couldn't get on the air. We tried our best. Our program was produced by Richard Ives, technical supervision by Bonnie Berman. Our address is rives@wlrn.org. That's rives as in Richard Ives at wlrn.org. By telephone, the old-fashioned way, area code 305-995-2258. CDs and audio cassettes are available. And find Topical Currents audio archives at WLRN.org. Tomorrow's Topical Currents addresses state budget cuts and their results on Florida International University. Steep tuition hikes are in the works, and the university's long-awaited medical school is put on hold. Mitch Medique will be here. And now our calendar for April 1st. On this day in 1777, 230 years ago, the first fax message is sent during the Revolutionary War from the Continental Congress to Ben Franklin in Paris after the Battle of Saratoga. Also on this day in 1876, 182 years ago, the first official National League Baseball game is played. The Boston Braves beat the New York Mets. And one more on this day in 1956, 52 years ago, Elvis Presley turns down the role for the lead in the film The King and I. Of course, Yul Brynner wins Best Actor in the role. And we leave with a thought from Ben Franklin, who once wrote under the pen name of the widow Silence Dogwood, quote, "A countryman between two lawyers is like a fish between two cats." And as Linda Ellerby said, and so it goes, happy April Fools. This is Joseph Cooper. Thanks for making public radio your companion today. Stay tuned now for Neil Conan and the Talk of the Nation from NPR News.